Welcome to the AI Forecast, the show where we decode the latest in data and AI. I'm your host, Paul Muller, and each week, especially if you're regular listeners, you'll know we deep dive into the industry, talking to thought leaders to help us uncover how data and AI continue to shape the enterprise landscape. Now, if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe and share the podcast. It really helps the show if you do that. We appreciate your support. And speaking of support, big thank you to the show sponsor Cloudera for bringing us another episode. Well, today I'm stoked to have Jack Kennedy, the CTO of communications and automation platform company Whippy, joining us. We're going to explore how he thinks about where and when to apply AI in building his apps. And with any luck, we'll share some lessons learnt that you can take away as you build your own AI augmented applications. Welcome to the podcast, Jack.
Cheers. Thanks, Mill, for having me. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you. Where do we find you today?
Yeah, I'm based in Dublin, in Ireland. Whippy's actually based out of Los Angeles. I lived there for a while, but I'm based in Dublin.
What's the experience like running a company that's spread across multiple countries, multiple time zones?
That's pretty interesting part of like our story, because where I met David, my co-founder, was in Los Angeles, and I worked with him at a previous company that was all in person in Santa Monica. When we linked back up to start the company, it was COVID, right? So you kind of had to work remote, and we grew from there. And like today we have pretty much employees on every single continent. It's cool. It's like, I love going in person. I'm actually in an office right now, but remote's been great. We've been able to hire amazing people all around the world. So it's worked out for us.
Well, looking forward to hearing more about your journey over the last 5 years, applying AI to the comms platform. And as we said, just lessons learnt along the way. Before we get into that, though, we do a little something at the start of each show called the lightning round, or the fast four, depending on who you speak to. The idea is the same, though. We get to know you through a slightly different lens. You ready to play the game?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do it. All right, first question. What would people who know you best say is your superpower, Jack?
I think if I had to guess, it would be something along the lines of being able to find practical solutions to problems quickly. So like, I'm not here to say I find the best ones, but I think I find good solutions quickly.
Great skill for a CTO to have.
Yeah,
it's kind of the job description, really, isn't it? All right, next up, the most impactful technology of all time.
It would kind of be remiss of me if I didn't say AI, right? So I think it's got to be AI. If I had to pick something else, if I was forced to pick something out of AI, I would pick something in energy, probably nuclear, right? So I'm going to go with AI.
All right, I'll take nuclear, actually. I think it's great.
Nice.
All right, what would you like to see AI automate for you personally in your future? Forget everyone else. What does Jack need?
Okay, personally, I actually hadn't thought about that, but one thing that I would love to see AI, one thing I'm interested in at the moment is like applying AI in the real world. So I think you mentioned, we were talking about before the show, like I was a mechanical engineer, right? So I'm always thinking like, hey, something that's software and AI combined with the real world, right? I'd love to see AI applied to street cleaning. I'd love to see like it's like Tesla driverless cars. They all seem great, but like I would love the equivalent for picking up the rubbish.
You've got my order now. Go start the company. I'll buy one.
Yeah.
All right. And that's our last one, actually, is we work with data every day, and some of us are really good at it and some of us maybe struggle with it. What are some of the best practices or hacks you've learned as someone who works with data?
Data just is one of those things that it's semi-buzzword, but it can genuinely be super helpful. And so I think when anyone's talking about data, kind of in inverted commas, my advice would be, hey, it's like the 80-20 rule really applies there. So like, what 20% of the data actually matters, and like just kind of forget about everything else, right? So when you're working with data, just like understand the problem as best you can, isolate the top 20%, and just like focus all your effort there and try not to get down in the weeds with everything else.
Well, let's get on to the topic, and now that you've introduced mechanical engineering into evidence, I'm gonna dig in on that, because I did a little bit of LinkedIn stalking, as I do before each show, and I noticed you did your master's in mechanical engineering. So I'm just curious, what did you learn about software when working with physical stuff? What did that teach you? And the inverse, what did working with physical objects teach you about software? It's an interesting career pivot.
I studied mechanical engineering undergraduate and graduate, and specifically manufacturing engineering, right? So how do you take a product and make a million of them? I love that. Like I was obsessed with that and everything in that world. Like my only knock on it was just how slow things took, right? So if you had a physical product, specifically a physical product that, let's say, you were selling to 1 million people, right? And you wanted to make a change for it, it's like that's a 2-year process, right? Between you design, test, get it manufactured somewhere else and get it. So like the feedback cycles are super long, right? In software, like if I have an idea, I can make the change on my computer and then like suddenly everyone could be using it like 5 minutes later if I wanted to, right? And so that was thrilling to some degree. I think that's it, the long and short of it. I think everything that I learned in mechanical engineering and manufacturing engineering can be applied to software. The testing, the product development, the pace of it and everything, like it all ties in, right? Like the way Toyota build cars, you can somewhat apply to software, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of corollaries, but the big difference was speed, and that's what attracted me to software engineering. And so when it came to do a master's, I actually did a master's in software engineering, but I wrote software for mechanical engineers. And so I got to kind of combine the two. And in mechanical engineering, you have to use these complex software programs to design things, right? So we worked on like an open source free one. Instead of spending 40 grand a year for a license to build your product, you could, use this off the shelf for free and no licensing and all that kind of stuff. So the two worlds kind of collided at the end of it.
I think your point about the impedance mismatch of the rate of change between those two is fascinating. And the other point you made about, if you look at processes like, say, Kanban as a software and project management methodology, or even a lot of the work that, Patrick Dubois and Gene Kim and others did around DevOps, which was very much inspired by the Toyota production system. You can now see that tracking in the opposite direction if you look at what, Elon Musk and the folks at Tesla are doing by applying software development principles and shorter life cycles to the mechanical world. And to your point about, building a street cleaner or whatever it might be, that the notion of software-defined hardware, I can see becoming a really vibrant place for development into the future. It's exciting stuff. It's a great time, isn't it?
100%. Never more opportunity.
Let's talk about software development. We were thrilled to have your co-founder, David Danishka, on. I think he was on our May 14 episode, around about then anyway, talking about Whippy's origins and just giving us a bit of background as to, I guess let's call it from a sales perspective, how AI is changing the way products are brought to market and sold and what they can do for clients. But more of a technical perspective as CTO, talk to us a bit about the problem space you're solving at Whippy, just to give our folks a bit of background and what you think you're trying to do differently when it comes to solving the problem.
We started working together and we didn't want to raise any venture capital, right? So essentially before we built Whippy, we were doing consulting, right? We were working with pharmacies, law firms, staffing agencies, all these different businesses, like small businesses up to like Fortune 2000 size companies, right? So as we were working with them, we just saw the same problem happening over and over again, right? Which is they were using one system to communicate with their customers for customer support, like let's say Zendesk. Another one for email marketing, MailChimp, let's say. And then another one for sales, right? To send sales emails, right? So they were using 3 softwares just to send emails, never mind make phone calls, text messages, WhatsApps, whatever it might be, right? So they were just drowning in software and specifically like communication-based software, right? And so when we took a step back, a lot of the customizations we were doing for people were integrating these things. Hey, if I have an open customer support ticket, remove them from my marketing campaign. Things that like should be so basic today, right, were just really hard to do. And when we took a step back, we said, hey, could we build something all in one for sales, support, and marketing communication across every channel, right? So phone calls, SMS, and email. Essentially, that's what we did. We kind of pivoted from an agency to a product company. Started off in just SMS. Like one thing that I always say is you need a moment to start the company, right? And there's a big regulatory change in SMS. And so we were able to like capitalize on that, grow pretty quickly, prove out our strategy of, hey, if you had your sales texting, your marketing texting, and your customer support texting for the businesses who index highly on that channel, if you had them in one place, like would that be valuable? Turns out it was. And like basically ever since then, we've just been adding more into the product and expanding in kind of circles like that.
Yeah, look, I love it. And when I first heard about it, it struck me it's almost the perfect use case for a lot of natural language models.
Yeah,
I work and advise a couple of different services firms, and one of the things I've noticed is the proliferation of communications tools. And especially if you are a services provider, you have to inherit some of your clients' tools. So,
yeah,
you know, we're working with one at the moment where they've got Monday and they've got Google Docs and whatever else, and that's their stack. But as a service provider, we're working with another who likes to use WhatsApp. They like to use again email, and so you're trying to you've got this issue of you might have every communications platform known to man that you have to adopt because your customers have it and that's how they want to
yeah,
communicate to automate, and trying to maintain transactional coherence all across that conversation. I mean, a human would struggle to do it.
exactly.
So being able to do it at scale with AI seems like a natural fit. So it sounds like you put lightning in a bottle with this idea.
Yeah, 100%. I think like it was a lot of just listening to our own customers and seeing the problem and then right place, right time with AI. Like on the AI stuff, like we started Whippy long before ChatGPT anyway. Like I was still in university when David and I started working together again. And I remember OpenAI had launched their like original Babbage model, right? Which was like you literally put some text in it and it spit out something that in hindsight was completely incoherent, but the world had never seen that really before, right? Again, before ChatGPT, like no chat interface, it was just an API. So I emailed the CTO of OpenAI off my college university email and said like, hey, can I get access to this? We ended up being one of the first people to fine tune a model. We built a custom model for responding to Google reviews. Like all of that, obviously at the time was not from a place of like, I think this is a big opportunity. It was just from a place of like interest, right?
Yeah.
And so it just kind of boils down to right place, right time to some degree.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I mean, you started the company in 2020. Was AI part of the plan from the beginning, or was it just was it just the fact that it happened to evolve right at the time you needed it?
No, because we were using things and in production live before the ChatGPT moment, right? It was very much a case of what tech's out there that we can use to automate some communication, right? So the first thing that we looked at was frequently asked questions, right? If I'm a staffing agency and every Friday 100 people text me saying when do I get paid, and the answer is Monday, but there's 100 variations of when do I get paid, where is my money's, etc. Right? Could you have a really basic AI model detect those and respond instantly? And so that was one of the first products we built. We used like an open source Google embeddings model, and like we're kind of off to the races there. I wouldn't say ChatGPT came for like another year and a half after that. So we were definitely looking for solutions that we could apply, but we weren't even necessarily thinking of it as AI, right? Like it by all means it was, but it was very much just a solution to a problem we had.
So let's talk about, because I guess it's introduced the logical next question to me, at least anyway, which is you've gone from this moment in 2020 when you call it the ChatGPT moment, where suddenly we've gone from what I'd call some fairly ordinary natural language processing tools to this incredible level of sophistication and diversification, first with text, then with audio and images,
Yeah.
now video. I mean, it's just the rate of change is just incredible. It kind of goes back to your comment about mechanical engineering is despite the fact that software is a lot more fluid, the rate of change in the software world, generally speaking, is actually pretty low insofar as you don't just jumping from, say, a standard like REST APIs to what's next overnight. You tend to be quite thoughtful. And
Yeah.
the CTO's role is in part to rate limit some of that change and stop people from jumping on fads, because obviously you create a lot of issues with regards to architectural integrity and so on and so forth. So tell me about how as you were in the middle of that, or you probably still are in the middle of that rapid rate of change,
Yeah.
how do you make good decisions about what and where to apply different models? When do we replace what we've already got so that it can be better? And where do you just go, you know what, it's good enough at the moment, we've got other problems to work on? Hopefully the question makes sense. You must deal with it every day, I'm sure.
There's a couple of ways to think about it. So first off is what I would say is I think like my principle from the beginning has been to like stay on top of what's new, really go deep, but like also you have to appreciate the principle of it's better to be right than first. So it doesn't matter what you do as long as the last thing you do is correct. If you take those two things together, like, I think you can solve a lot of your problems, right? So for me, on the software engineering side, I think if you're a software engineer listening to this, right, you actually have a massive advantage because the cutting edge of AI is being built for software engineers, right? Software engineers building products for software engineers is like where the bleeding edge of AI is today. So to some degree, all you need to do is see what's working, find the best, and take those principles and apply them to other parts of the economy, right? The reason why software engineers and software engineering tools are kind of the most advanced in AI today is two things. One is, as I said, software engineers like to build tools for themselves, right? And then the second thing is code compiles. So there is a right answer, right? In many other industries, there isn't actually a right answer. And so AI can only be so useful. But I think there's a trend, and you mentioned this, like between, audio, video, we just see these things getting better. And so if you know where the puck is going and you're in a different industry where there is no necessarily right answer, we're going to get pretty close to it. So let me give you a real concrete example. Like, we work with a lot of staffing and recruiting agencies. There's no necessarily perfect candidate to hire. Here's a job description. We ask them these questions. We do an interview, but there's no real okay, two people got a score of an 8. It's like, well, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, who should actually get the job, right? It's not perfect, right?
It's fuzzy.
But there's two parts of that. One is you can see these models are getting better. So they're probably going to get pretty close to finding out the right person. Like, you know what I mean? Based on, if you can give it enough data, they're going to get relatively close. And then the second thing of it is you have to say, okay, do you build AI tools for recruiters, or do you just replace the recruiter? And that's another product technical thing, because there are two different things that you build. And in software engineering, what we're seeing is, hey, these people started out as building tools to replace the engineer, right? So one really hot company right now is called Devon, and we actually use them. And it's that started as it's an autonomous engineer, but it's now it's basically just a tool for an engineer to be more productive. But the level of detail that they went into to automate things away is huge. And so now I can do 10 things when I could have only done one before. And so we're taking a lot of those principles after having looked at a lot of products that we think didn't work, and we're able to apply them to the communication space, which is, hey, some things in communications can just be fully automated. We'll just stick on the recruiting example for a second. I call into a business, I know you're looking for a job. That's just a standard set of, let's say, 10 questions based on the job. That position in a company has 125% turnover in a year. Meaning, if you're a phone recruiter, you leave the recruiting agency more than once a year. They can't get people to do that job, right? So that's a job that we've seen that can be fully automated. AI is actually better than it than humans. It can speak any language. It works 24/7. It documents it and puts it perfectly in your CRM. Person's completely gone. But on the other side of the house, there's many situations where AI can't do that in staffing and recruiting. Convincing you, Paul, to take the position. Hey, we think you're the best candidate. This is the job officer. A human still needs to do that for the moment, right? And so that's where our phone system is a great tool to make that call, and it will record, transcribe, it'll fill out fields in your applicant tracking system. But hey, a human still had to do that, and it's still a tool for the human. And so, kind of to tie everything back together, from an engineering or product point of view, I always recommend people, hey, go look at what the bleeding edge is, try all the tools, and then take them back and see how you can apply them to your problem, your domain. And what I'm seeing anyway is that some parts of your product, you need to build them for full autonomy. And some parts of it, you need to build a great tool for the human to save time. And that's kind of my structure for thinking about it.
Yeah, look, I like that a lot. And in introducing that idea, you've introduced the notion of judgment. So you've got to make that judgment call about where AI would be a good fit versus not, which puts you into, speaking of the word fuzzy, puts you into this interesting area where, judgment is a human thing. And I guess judgment could be, around ethics. It could be around, compliance and legality. It could also be around how customers are going to accept it.
100%.
As CTO, what's your take on I suppose it's really the question is, just because we can do it, should we? How are customers going to feel about this? Are they going to react well to it, or are they going to be terrified that it's like Big Brother's watching? How do you think about that problem?
That's one of the hardest things right now, I would say. And it's also on the engineering side, but also on the sales and marketing side. There's like three buckets of people. There's what we call one bucket internally the dreamers. They're the people who just want to automate everything away. Like they just want it all to be automated and like to sit on a beach and just have their business run. And it's like, they'll come in and they'll ask us, can we do this? And we're like, yeah, technically you can do that, but like, are you sure? Do you really want to do that? Like, are you going to pay for that? And it's like invariably, like when we tell them there's an annual contract, they're like, yeah, no, and then they bounce. Okay, so like they're the dreamers. The other end of the spectrum is like the people who are scared. That's kind of like the people we're talking about, right? They just don't want it to happen. I understand their concerns. Like they're all concerned, but they're all concerned for different reasons. The people who want to automate everything, they want to automate everything for the same reason. They don't want to have people on their team, they just want an easier life. The people who are concerned, they all have a different reason. Where we like to play is the people in the middle. It's the people who they do 10 things in their day. These two things are a pain in the ass, and they know and they kind of know and want AI to automate them. They know because they've actually gone and used ChatGPT and they're like pretty surprised at what it can do. And they're like, okay, if this can happen, I can probably automate these two things in my business. So that's where we like to play because that's where we are today. On the other side of the house, and I guess to anyone listening who's like either, let's say you're listening and you're at a company and you either have executives who are saying, we're not implementing this AI, it's too scary, or we want to use AI for everything. You need to be the voice of reason, like in the middle, right? And you need to pull the people, this is what I do all day. You need to pull the people who don't want to do anything and say, look, I appreciate that. That's a really valid concern. But have you thought about doing this one really low risk thing? Again, an example here is like, okay, well, you get 100 phone calls after hours. No one on your team speaks Spanish. And they're just all going to voicemail and never getting called back. Do you think it would be okay to collect a bit of information and then translate it into English and then send it to you as an email so you can actually like service those customers? They almost always go, yeah, no, that'd actually be okay. And so now you've bought someone in. You've taken like a part of their day that never gets done, that they agree with you it would be a better customer experience if they could do it with AI, and you just scope down what you're going to do really, really small. And then eventually you can get buy-in over time. For the dreamer people, that's like a little bit more, they're actually the more challenging people to deal with, right? The dreamer is you need to kind of run the same playbook, but it's like, hey, lovely idea that you want to replace all the employees, but that's not possible today. How about we just do this one thing and we're going to do this for 3 months. And then if that works, we're going to move on to this portion and then we're going to go from there. And like, if you're again at a company where you have like an executive, let's say, who's like that, you got to show like quick wins and then build. They're already bought in, which is great. But if you start automating everything and get bad results, either you're getting the boot or like the whole AI product is getting the boot. So like, that's my advice to both ends of the spectrum is actually kind of similar. It's like start small, narrow the focus, up the quality, and I think you can get buy-in then from pretty much anyone.
I think that's fabulous advice. Yeah, I can see there's a bit of psychology in the whole process, really, isn't there?
That's all it is, really.
All right. Well, let's talk a bit about, if you're somebody else who's like right now thinking about building an app or dealing with that question, as you say, that executive who's saying, let's go. What advice have you got for them about how to think about, there's a lot of choice out there in terms of, technology stacks and architectural approaches and so on and so forth. What words of wisdom would you give them looking back over the last 5 years? What would you do differently then that you've learnt about now as you think about making some of those choices?
It's a great question. One, I'll answer it in a second, but the one thing that I'd say that I didn't necessarily know how it was going to be valuable. Well, sorry, I knew why it was going to be valuable, but I got the reason wrong, right? So we put a lot of effort in early on into our public-facing API. So anyone can come along to Whippy and use our API to automate a text message or an email or all these kind of things, right? And at the time that we built that, we didn't have a lot of technical customers at the time. We wanted to service more technical customers, and that's why we built the API. But at the time, someone would have said, "Oh, why are you doing that? Like that's not a group of people that you should be going after. Like you index highly on, other sorts of businesses." And the reason why that ended up being super valuable for us and we put a lot of effort into it, like to make it really good. And the reason why that ended up being valuable for us is now all these AI tools, they need APIs. So if you want to build a AI agent that sends a WhatsApp and it triggers a call, it's like actually Whippy's the only API that like really easily combines them in one and layers in like the human element that they can send a text from their phone. And so that's been a big investing in a really high performing API that's easy for humans to use turns out also to be really helpful for building AI tools. Like the AI agents, they also want really well performing APIs that are easy to understand. To some degree, like AI, the ChatGPT, whatever you want to call it, is just looking at all the information you've put out in the world and then guessing what's the next best thing. It turns out like a developer does the exact same thing. They read your API docs and they guess what they should be doing. So that's one thing that we got right.
I think that's really great advice. I want to make sure we capture that. So the one thing that you would do differently is that you wouldn't do something differently.
Yeah.
Great. I really like it though. I think it's a really thoughtful thing, which is it, be mindful of the fact that agentic technologies, a computer talking to a computer will need a really well-formed API that doesn't change every 5 minutes. So I think it's a really good bit of advice.
I'll tell you one thing, that our back-end programming language is a programming language called Elixir. And it's great for real-time applications, like things, text messages, emails, they all need to sync to all these places in real time. And it's a little bit more niche, I will say. So another big benefit we have is it's very easy to hire people, right? Because we know they're good. If they know this programming language or have experience with it before, we know they're good, right? So it's helped us a lot there. It's helped me a lot hiring because just filtering down and finding the right people has been easier. One concern I had a year ago was that, all these AI programming tools have been trained on Python and JavaScript. They're like the main languages. And so I was really worried, I would say about 12 months ago, that like using those two languages was going to be a massive benefit to people because the AI knew them better. So that's a potential mistake that if I look back on, I would think harder about that decision. At the time, I chose Elixir because it was easier to hire. It was simpler to some degree, less ways to shoot yourself in the foot, really good for our specific problem.
Well, and sorry if I could interrupt you. And at that point in time, no one had invented a piece of software that would write code for you, I guess.
No. And actually, in a funny way, Elixir has this tool inside of it, which is like code that almost writes other code. You can extend the language to this thing called macros, which is like the closest you could get to code writing other code. Luckily enough, at the same time, like AI has gotten so good that it just understands Elixir, and at the same time, code compiles to a yes/no answer, and so it's just gotten iteratively better, and that hasn't been a problem for us. But definitely, 12 months ago, I was regretting that decision.
Look, I can only imagine, because again, technical debt's a real problem, and I suppose it's only going to get worse, at least in my impression, as things move quickly. So looking back again to decisions that people need to make, what advice do you have for people when it comes to choosing, models or APIs? Because I presume that once you've started to work with a model and a set of APIs and it's started to learn more about, whether it's your business, the business process, whatever it might be, and this is coming from a non-developer standpoint, instinctively I feel like it must be tough to remove that API and replace it with another, because it'd be like replacing an employee. You've kind of blowing away all that training. Is that a consideration, or is it pretty easy to swap different models and training data sets in and out?
We have been provider agnostic from the very beginning because in the communication space, we had to be. When we built our communications, API integrations, email, SMS, voice, we just saw it as a massive risk to being locked into one company. And so we built all these integrations, plug in, plug out, bring your own API keys, all this kind of stuff. And so when AI came along and all these LLM providers came out, we straight away applied the same principle to them. But what I will say is, like, as an advice for people is, you can architect your system in such a way to separate the model from the data. I think OpenAI's models are great. I'd probably say they're the best. They have models, APIs that you can use where you kind of pass the data in and get a response out. And then they also have products where you essentially give them all of your data. And then it might make it better, but essentially you've given the data to them. And so to move it to someone else becomes very difficult. And so what I would say is you need to separate your kind of data storage from your model usage. And so that honestly goes back to like all the same principles that people might have applied before. You need to have a X database, you need to have a good database architecture, blah, all this kind of stuff, right? Store your data that you pass into the model, store the data that the model gives you back, and save it. Hey, this input output came from this model, whether it be Claude or OpenAI. If you do that, you'll be able to switch really easily. Even if you start today with just using one, set yourself up like that, because then you can go and reuse it somewhere else. You can reuse the same data somewhere else. And honestly, on the software engineering side, there's so many companies that have been built in the last 6 months to just do that problem that you described, to switch between one and the other. They call them LLM proxies. You know, I'll take my Open API keys, my Claude Anthropic keys, my Google keys, I'll put them into this dashboard, and then this company, there's loads of them, will give me an API that I can use that make it every request look like it's going to OpenAI, but then it actually goes to Anthropic. So this is like a big area of focus. Loads of people are working on it. And I think the biggest, kind of tried to say it, but like if you own your own data, I think in the long run, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I would just be cautious of tools that don't let you take out your data, and tools where you have to give it all to them without tracking it yourself. Like those are kind of the risky things, and I would just avoid those. I think you'll be okay.
Architecturally, I know that a lot of our listeners come from highly regulated industries where, whether it's by regulation or just simply through an abundance of caution, they feel it's necessary to maintain a hybrid model when it comes to their data lakes, some on premises and some in the cloud. Any thoughts about that from your experience, just all reflections on the challenges of working in a highly regulated environment?
Yeah, I think that's honestly a really exciting area of the market, to be honest, right? Is building, if I was looking at different ideas, I think going and helping people build tools to leverage LLMs in a regulated on-premise environment is just a massive opportunity. Like, I talk to people all the time and they're like, hey, I want to use ChatGPT. I want to give them my quarterly financials, my weekly product data, whatever it is, for, let's say, a retailer or a bank. And they can't give that to ChatGPT. But I know from experience that if you just throw in a CSV to ChatGPT, it will give you better analysis than anyone working at your company. Like, that's for sure. And so to some degree, if you can get that going, that it can be deployed on premise and used at a company, I think that's a huge opportunity. At the same time, the one big benefit of AI is all the open source work going on, right? There's amazing models from DeepSeek and Llama and all these people. There's a tool you can download online called LLM Studio, which basically is a desktop app for open source models, and you can try it and it looks like ChatGPT, but it's all on your computer. It never leaves. People probably should be wary of it if you're in a highly regulated environment. That's a completely fair concern. I don't think that should block people from implementing it. I think with a pretty low lift, you can actually deploy some of these things on-prem and get a lot of value. And then the fine-tuning element, so making them better on top of your own data, you can also run that on-prem now as well. And so honestly, we're at a moment where I think the knowledge of how you can do these things, it's going to get distributed very quickly. Like, people will figure out how to run these things on-prem, and they'll work. Maybe not, they might not always be at the bleeding edge, but they won't be far behind.
A couple of questions as we wrap up, just about the future. And I guess it's, again, a big part of your job is to spend a little bit of time crystal balling, but also a little bit of time doing what I would call, you're the signal to noise high pass filter.
Yeah.
You wake up every morning and it seems like there's another company, another API. You mentioned DeepSeek before, came out of literally nowhere. What was it, 6 months ago? And just blew everyone away. You've equally got a whole bunch of people out there who are just rubbing the letters AI onto every product that they've got. Based on what you're seeing, what areas of enterprise AI are overhyped in your opinion? And you don't need to name names, but feel free to if you want. I love a bit of controversy. And which ones do you think are hidden gems that maybe people aren't seeing that just you'd like to share with others?
I'm not going to say specific companies.
Oh, that's a shame.
I know, I think of any off the top of my head, but there is like this blanket of people who are going around or like to say online, whether it be LinkedIn or Twitter, that hey, like all our jobs are gone in 2 years. You guys don't even realize. You know what I mean? Like they're selling that sort of message, right? And
I saw one in marketing literally recently because of Meta's announcement about creating ads, for example. Yep.
yeah, and it's like, you know what? Like I I haven't worked in this every day. I'm every day surprised at what you can do. I'm always surprised. I'm like, wow, I didn't think you'd do that. Wow, this is amazing. And at the same time, I'm also still grappling with like trying to get the AI to pronounce words correctly. So in one moment, yeah, exactly. In one moment, like it's like you're blown away. The next moment, you're like, okay, wow, like a 2-year-old could have done that, right? And so the reality of getting these things in production and working and all these benefits takes a lot of work from a lot of really smart people really focusing hard for like an extended period of time. And so I think the thought that everyone's job or is going to be replaced in 2 years is overblown. Mm-hmm. With that comes some element of hey, are we going to hit some sort of fatigue, like some sort of AI fatigue? And I would say to anyone at a company is like, if you see that materializing for you like AI fatigue, right? Don't stop. Like that's the moment to actually invest the most because there is a lot to be gained. And so I think it's balancing kind of reality versus like reality today versus where you're going to be tomorrow, and that's like the biggest challenge today for me.
I
anyway.
think that's one of the most refreshing perspectives we've had on the podcast. Not to denigrate previous guests, but it's just fabulous to hear what I would describe as a refreshing level of pragmatism. That balance between the hope and the optimism that this technology represents, but also the pragmatism to say there's still plenty of work to be done.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's great. Lastly, in terms of just where the future of this technology is going, obviously academia and industry is making a lot of investments. What would you like to see change in terms of how the industry approaches AI development, or maybe put differently, where are some of the areas of focus that you're interested in about where the hockey puck is going to with this technology?
So very, very specifically in like I'd say my niche of B2B software is that balance of what I was talking about earlier of like, hey, is there going to be like agentic AI that replaces everything you do or like a good chunk of what you do versus like a great AI user interface? Finding when to deploy both of those is kind of is a focus, right? And I think more people should think about that. Even on the like UI side, if you're going to build like ChatGPT has just like conditioned us to like type something into a box and like we get it. And so you see all these tools like Canva, Notion, like these big tools, like they've just added boxes to their apps. And you type something in and you're meant to get something out. Invariably, it either doesn't work, or if it does, you then want to edit it. So there's this whole new class of software getting built of like chatting with something to get an output, but then being able to go to like the old mode of editing it, of editing. So like an example is I type into a box, I get a graphic split out of me in Canva, but then I want to go manually change it to blue. It just doesn't really make sense for me to just say to the AI, turn it to blue and then twist this a little bit because it just takes too long, right? It never gets it 100% to go back to the fuzziness. And so building software that feels fresh today, i.e. you can chat with it or it understands context, but then also spitting out like a traditional user interface that people need then for finer control. That's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and is I think something that other people in this space should think of as well. Don't go all in on the full chat experience and like replace your user interface, but you still need all the traditional software tools, bells and whistles, but think about how you can make the product easier for people to use as well, because that's what they expect now.
That resonates with me. I literally had that experience yesterday. So I used some AI tools to get me started on a task, and I thought, I'm now going to have to spend more time trying to figure out how to edit this, because it was, and literally, as you say, change the color wasn't blue. It was, well, actually it was blue. What am I saying? And it was just getting it, wrong. And I'm getting frustrated and thinking it would have been easier had I, an hour and a half later fighting the tool, this would have been easier if I'd just done it the traditional way.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was on a different podcast where somebody was trying to convince me that like the traditional way is gone, and that if you're building a software platform today, that you would just build it as a box. I think that is great for ChatGPT. Like, it works. That is what the product is, right? It's just text on a page. Most businesses don't operate with text on a page. Whoever can marry the two together, which is a great user experience combined with like fine-grained control, I think that's a big area of opportunity. So if you're thinking of if you're evaluating tools, I would look at that, right? Where can I make the user experience easier? Who has the best user experience, but still the most flexibility? If you're thinking about building software, is the product you're building, like, can it have both of them together? You're still going to have to go do all the work of building like the core infrastructure, but where can you layer on AI to make it easier to use, to compete better with other people? I think these are all like really interesting questions that I think about every day.
Yeah, I think it's such a great point. And, just reflecting on your comments there, this is almost analogous to the early days of Xerox PARC and the invention of the graphical user interface. Is, I lived through 10, 15 years of industry learning and upheaval as we worked out the best way to use this new technology to create a user experience. And you'd even argue that even 30, 40 years on from that, we're still learning. But
yeah,
the point I was, and you saw it with Apple introducing touch in a really big way, is it took a while for developers and for people to work out how to best to interact with it. We're really only a couple of years into working with natural language tools. And yeah, I think your message is a good one, which is the user interface design, what it means to user interface design. I think we've yet to figure out all the lessons from that.
AI is interesting in that regard, because I think you're right with the graphical user interface, but I think the question to also think about, like a more macro question, is like, is AI the next mobile, or is AI the next internet? Is it a new form factor, or is it a new thing completely, right? And it's like, with mobile, like, we made all these mistakes at the start, right? Like, Facebook tried to build a website on a mobile phone, not a mobile app, right? And they had to change that. And I think we're all going through that to some degree right now. It's like, do we build the box, as I say, or do we build a wrapper on top of the box, or how are they integrated? Like, that's what we're trying to figure out right now. Or, there's a group of people today, there's this protocol from Anthropic that came out called MCP, which basically is a way of connecting ChatGPT and Claude to your API, to go back to my API point from the beginning, which is like, hey, are we all just going to use our software through an LLM chat style interface, right? And so is that the next mobile app? I don't know, but we're like keeping our eye on all of these kind of different things. And when we think there's going to be a winner, we'll go all in on that one.
I love it. And look, I think, it ultimately, as I said to one of my team members recently, is, what we have here is a failure of imagination. We've got all these new tools, and I think the winners, certainly to me, feel like the ones who reimagine the problem through a completely different lens, rather than applying yesterday's thought processes to tomorrow's tools. So yeah, I think it's a powerful way to end the podcast, and no doubt, and I'm hoping inspired a few folks to take another look at this. Hey, Jack, I really want to thank you for joining us. If people are interested in learning more about Whippy or your work, where can they go to learn more?
You can find us online at whippy.ai. And if you want to call our voice AI product and talk to one of our AI sales reps, you can go to whippy.ai/voice-AI. And you can give us a call and talk to one of our AI employees.
I'm excited to, I might give that a go. I haven't done that yet. Jack, I've got to thank you tremendously for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
It's been great having you. Well, that's a wrap, everyone. Well, what lessons have you learnt when it comes to building AI into your apps, and what are you going to do differently? And thank you again to the amazing folks at Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.